Let me begin by thanking Loa for inviting me back to Berkeley. I got my PhD in 1991 at UC Berkeley under the guidance of Professor Loa Dittmer. And it has always been my great pleasure and honor to come back to UC Berkeley and to attend those amazing academic conferences. Today I'm going to talk about bringing the strategic triangle back, and I learned strategic triangle from Loa. The role of medium and small countries in US-PRC rivalry. The starting point is those countries are in the middle, so they have great anxiety among them that are caught in the intensified hegemonic rivalry between the United States and the PRC because they bear the pressure from two great powers and in two games, security game and economic game, with twisted precedents, by which I mean that it seems that the current US Trump administration has elevated the economic game over security game so that American allies cannot count on US for benefits like the provision of public goods, etc., even if they follow US strategic leadership. In the past, the strategic game seems to take precedence over the economic game, so those countries can expect to receive economic concessions and benefits if they are faithful, loyal US allies. No longer the case. Right now, the United States is demanding that the policy of make US great again and America first would require that those allies that are quote unquote taking advantage of the United States pay their due price. So they are forced to adjust to the new rules under America first. There is an underdeveloped perspective, namely when we are talking about the rivalry between the United States and the PRC, the emphasis is obviously on these two belligerents. But then I think there has been underdeveloped discussion about those countries caught in between. So in the literature on the search of US-PRC rivalry, the emphasis is typically on the interaction between the two antagonists. And little is said on the role played by the medium and small countries, MSCs, in this presentation that find themselves on the front line of the rivalry. How do they navigate between the two hegemons? What is the response of the hegemons to their maneuvering? These are the questions this paper asks. Now we need, obviously, for a triangular perspective that can capture power asymmetry. Triangularity is necessary because we are talking about MSCs caught between the rival hegemons. So intrinsically, we are talking about the triangular relationship. On the other hand, we know that this MSC, the medium small country, is much less powerful than the two hegemons. So we have power symmetry. So we need a framework that can capture both triangularity and power symmetry. And these are the strategic triangles developed by Loa. And we can see that there are four types of them in Ménage à Trois. You have three friends in a happy family. In marriage, you have the partners teaming up against the pariah or the outcast. In romantic triangle, you have the two wings courting the pivot, while the wings are at each other's throat. And in unit veto, you have three foes fighting among themselves. And in the literature, we all know that because it had a lot to do with the US-Soviet Union, PRC triangle, Great Triangle, during that period of the Cold War, and Henry Kissinger was directing the United States to the very position of the pivot, and so pivot is very popular. It seems to be the most enviable position because it can, by tilting between the two wings, get concessions from both of them. So pivot is the most enviable position as long as you can hold it. And then power symmetry. The conventional wisdom in the traditional IR theories would predict that when you are facing a great rising power, you would either balance through internal balancing or external balancing. Internal balancing means that you increase your military preparedness, and external balancing means that you get a strong ally. Bandwagoning, that's for the weak states' consumption. Big powers won't do that, but then if you are really a tiny small country facing a strong neighbor, you may think of bandwagoning. And hedging. Hedging is a mixed two-pronged strategy, that is engagement, balancing. But the two prongs are not equally weighted. Balancing prong takes precedence. So balancing, bandwagoning, hedging. Traditional wisdom, discussing power symmetry, and strategic triangle, talking about triangularity. And we need something that can combine these two perspectives. Assuming we have three actors with three interconnected relationships, power symmetry of a particular type, because here we are talking about x equals y greater than z. It's a two-head asymmetrical triangle. We can have other types of triangle like x equals y equals z or x greater than y equals z. But this particular type is of particular importance and relevance to us. And the resultant, tight bipolarity, because if you have this kind of two-headed strategic triangle, then x and y will fight for dominance, and this relation with x and y will become zero-sum. And then we get this. This is the MSCs choices. You can be a pivot, that is, you are right in the middle between the two great powers G1 and G2. But that's a very difficult position. If you consider yourselves to be threatened mainly by G1, then you will tilt toward the right-hand side. That is, you will balance against G1. But you are a small country, right? So you cannot do internal balancing alone. You have to plus it with external balancing. You need to get a strong country on your side in order to successfully balance G1. But then you are a small country, right? So when you are getting into the embrace of that strong country, G2, you are bandwagoning with it. So balancing against G1 is tantamount to bandwagoning with G2. That's the two sides of the same coin. Then you are a partner of G2. Vice versa, you can be a partner of G1. And lo and behold, the hedging position is the most interesting one. You can be a hedger. For example, G1 is a big threat to you, so you are balancing against it and you are on the side of G2. But then you want to flirt with G1 because you need economic benefits. Probably you want to soften the attitude, the hostility of G1 towards you. Probably you have a long-term goal of changing the values and the institutions of G1 so that it will not pose a threat in the long term to you. So for various reasons, you want to engage G1. But you want to do it from the safe position of being within the G2 sphere of influence. So that's the hedging partner position. You can be a hedger on G2's side, or you can be a hedger on G1's side. So there are 5 positions you can choose on this spectrum for a medium small country caught between two great powers. The peculiarity of East Asia is that we have 2 hierarchies. We have a security hierarchy dominated by the United States because it's the strongest military power in the world, versus an economic hierarchy in East Asia dominated by the PRC. The two great powers have been competing for influence and the loyalties of the MSCs between them along a geostrategic fault line. Now, because of historical reasons, MSC's rational choice, a dominant strategy emerged, that is, hedging on the US side against a rising China or hedging partner of the United States. The hedger's logic is that the perceived major security threat, typically China because of geographic proximity and so on and so forth, determines the MSC's basic position. It has to be on the American camp, which is then attenuated, however, by the need to reap benefits from engaging with that threat, that is, economic doing business with China. And the security, if you are doing this, if you are doing business with your threat, then you need security, and that security will be provided by the other great power, namely the United States. So the US would act as an insurance. This arrangement makes it possible for the MSCs to both worry about the rise of China and pursue benefits offered by it. So that's a very clever design, right? Everyone goes for it. Strategic fault line in East Asia. As we can see that these are the 5 options, and most of the countries would take hedging partner of the United States. But things went wrong. Bad. Hedging was made more difficult, not because of changes of strategy by MSCs, but because great powers changed their behavioral patterns. After the financial tsunami dramatically changed the power ratio between China and the United States, setting the stage for a power transition. China becomes cocky, nationalistic, and aggressive. This is what I call Shockwave 1. And the US turns more defensive and mercantilist, and we want to restrict the MSC's hedging behaviors. This I call Shockwave 2. So we have 2 shockwaves. Pre-2008, that is before the coming of the first shockwave, the majority of MSCs in East Asia, they were the happy hedging partners of the United States. So the security reliance on the United States, cum economic dependence on China, they have both. And China was tolerant, but if we take the special case of Taiwan during that period of time, pre-2008, was under the first Democratic Progressive Party President Chen Shui-bian, and so he was adamantly anti-PRC and China was hostile. So you can see that Taiwan was the odd man out. And we are going to see that Taiwan remains the odd man out throughout the way. The first shockwave came in 2008 and 2016. Majority of the MSCs in East Asia shift away from Beijing toward Washington under Chinese assertiveness. We just heard it from Ed and from Sui-Shen on the South China Sea dispute. So China has become more aggressive, and all these countries flocking back to the United States. For the US was the insurance, right? And China was aggressive. But lo and behold, in the case of Taiwan, Taiwan joined the hedging chorus at that time as the last member. So hedging partner of the United States, Ma Ying-jeou was very eager to keep good relations with the United States. He managed to buy a lot of weapons from the US. The security reliance on the US was their cum economic dependence of China. The relationship between China and Taiwan went so well. There was a Shima summit meeting held in November 2015. That was half year, 6 months before Ma stepped down. And so China was very concessionary, and Taiwan remained the odd man out, right? Before 2008, Taiwan was not in this hedging chorus. After 2008, Taiwan moving, and everyone was thinking of moving out. The second shockwave came with the election of Trump. And from 2017, the majority of the MSCs in East Asia find that they had an estranged relation with the United States under Trump's America First policy, and there was a partial reversion towards a regional hedging in the middle. And China was all embracing, right? You're coming back, I welcome you. And that, I think, there was a very important meeting. I think it was after the Xihu G20 meeting that China decision makers decided that we should be soft on our neighbors because we have to deal with the United States. That's a priority. But in case of Taiwan, there was this abandonment of hedging on demand, and increasingly Taiwan moved having this amicable relation with the United States. Most recently, a county magistrate from Taiwan was able to get into the White House. That was unprecedented. And China was hostile to Taiwan. So Taiwan, again, odd man out. So we have two logics. Majority of the MSCs in East Asia, they prefer to stay in the original position, that is the hedging partner of the United States. But they will respond to pressure by tilting to the other side. That is, their position will be affected by the behaviors of the potential security threat. China, you push me, I will go to the United States. And the commitment of their security provider. If the United States push me, then I will move back to China. But in the case of Taiwan, it's the national identity and the electoral result that would determine Taiwan's position on the 1992 consensus, arguably the most critical issue in cross-strait relations. So Taiwan's MSC position is not about foreign policy, but the definition of who we are. So there's a lack of flexibility. Taipei would not yield to external pressure, as we can see today. And Beijing would not show tolerance to any independence-leaning government. So we have lack of flexibility in cross-strait relations. So the conclusion is it's imperative to capture the triangular and asymmetrical structure and the interactions between hegemonic rivals and MSCs to understand Asian disorder. Hedging partner of the United States becomes dominant strategy and role for East Asian MSCs as China rises. But when China rises to the point of reaching power transition with the United States, shockwaves were sent first by Beijing, then by the US. So the major MSCs responded by tilting towards the other side. And Taiwan is the odd man out, because Taiwan and cross-strait relations follow another logic in which both the great power and the MSC lack flexibility. So here is where the greatest danger lies in Asian disorder. Thank you very much.